Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Zakir Hussain Khan and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the third video of customer churn playlist. If you haven't watched the first and second part of this series, I will put the link in the description below or you can find it in somewhere else. So in this video, we are going to focus on the senior citizen and we are going to find out that why senior citizens are more likely to churn and what measures we can take to retain our senior citizens. So let's get started. So in this video, we are going to see that why senior citizens are more likely to churn, and there are some external factors and some internal factors. Whether a senior citizen has partner or dependents, that's a completely external factors that we cannot control by ourselves. But if we look at the internal factors, the online backup, online security, tenure and contract type, and there are lots more, we can control the internal factors and we can find out by the internal factors that what factors are causing the senior citizen to leave our service and what we can offer our senior customers so they can stay connected to our service. So we are in Excel now and we are going to answer why senior citizens are more likely to churn and how to reduce the churn rate. Let's insert a pivot table. I will bring the newly created senior citizen in the rows. Let's bring the churn rate and total customers. And I will bring the family status column in the rows section. Now go to design, report layout, show in tabular form. We don't want the grand total or subtotal. And the family status is nothing but the combination of dependents and partners. So we will filter only the yes portion, which will be the senior citizen. And we will apply the conditional formatting. So now if you can see the senior citizen who have dependents, their churn rate is 25%, but only 8 number of total customers are fall into senior citizen category. And if you look at the partner, we have 490 customers that fall into senior citizen category and their churn rate is 36%. Whereas those who are single and the number is 561, their churn rate is 49%, which is maximum in this case. So if you can see that those who have partners, their churn rate is little lower than those who are single. Because the senior citizens who are single, they can decide anything by their own. But those who have partner, they need to decide together that they need this kind of service or not. So maybe their partner are interested using that service. That's why the senior citizen, if it is male or female, was unable to leave the service. And if you look at the dependents and the partner and dependents, the churn rate is quite similar. And those who have partner and dependents, the churn rate is minimum in this case, because the decision doesn't rely only on one person in this case. The decision relies on all of the family members of that senior citizen. This is why the churn rate for the partner and dependents is minimum. So let's remove the family status because this is an external factor and we cannot control the family status of a senior citizen because we cannot get them married or we cannot provide them kids or some other family members. So let's focus on the internal factors. So I will remove the family status and let's bring phone service. You can see only 104 customers are not using the phone service and the churn rate is 42% for them, and almost 1000 senior citizens are using the phone service and their churn rate is 41%. So it doesn't matter that whether they are using the phone service or not, the churn rate remains the same for those who are using the phone service and for those who are not using the phone service. But those who are using the phone service, their churn rate is 41%. So there must be some problem with our phone service. We need to look further into the phone service and we need to improve our phone service so that we can retain our existing customers. Now let's remove the phone service and bring the multiple lines. And similar pattern, we can see that those who do not have any multiple lines, their churn rate is 40%, whereas those who have multiple lines, their churn rate is little higher, which is 42%. But the number of customers who are using the multiple lines, the number is 665, whereas those who are not using the multiple lines, the number is 373. So we need to figure out that what problems lies with the multiple lines also, because the churn rate is much higher those who are using the multiple lines. Now let's remove the multiple lines and bring the internet service, and we can see a very clear pattern that 831 number of total customers, a huge number of customers are using the fiber optic, and their churn rate is much higher. That means the fiber optic internet service is not giving too much satisfaction to our senior citizen, whereas who are using the DSL, the number is 259, but the churn rate is 30%, which is much less than the fiber optic. So if we can move our senior citizen from fiber optic to DSL, and in the meantime if we can improve our fiber optic, then I think we can retain our senior citizens. Now let's remove the internet service and bring online security, and you can see that 808 number of customers are not using online security, and the number is quite high, and almost 50% of 808 senior citizens have already left our service. Whereas those who are using the online security, the churn rate is 22%, but the number is not quite high in terms of total customers. So if we can provide the online security to our senior citizen, we can retain our senior citizen, because it is really a very good service as it indicates in the churn rate metrics. Now let's remove the online security and bring back the online backup, and we can see the similar pattern that 614 customers are not using the online backup, and the churn rate is 52%, and whereas those who are using the online backup, their churn rate is only 30%. So it is also a good service. We can provide this online backup to our existing customers. Now let's remove the online backup and bring back the device protection, and a quite similar pattern here also. Those who are not using the device protection, the number of total customers 624, their churn rate is 51%. That means almost half of our senior citizens have already left, those who do not have any device protection. Whereas those who have device protection, the number of total customer is 466, but the churn rate is 32%, which is quite low compared to those who do not have device protection. So we can provide to our existing customers the device protection service. Now let's remove the device protection and bring back the tech support, and you can see the similar pattern. Those who are using the tech support, their churn rate is 19%, but the number of total customers are not quite high. We can provide the tech support to our existing customers to reduce our churn rate. Now let's bring the streaming TV, and those who are not using the streaming TV service, their churn rate is 46%, and the number is quite high. And those who are using the streaming TV, their churn rate is 40%, and the number of total customers are quite high in this case. So there must be problem with our streaming TV service. We need to figure it out by ourselves. After that we can provide this service to our customers, but before that we need to stop providing this service if we want to retain our existing customers. And a very similar advice for the streaming movies. You can see it is also following the same pattern. Those who are not using the streaming movie service, their churn rate is 45%, and the total number of customers are quite similar for those who are not using the streaming movie service and those who are using the streaming movie service. And those who are using, their churn rate is 41%, not a very good indicator for the streaming movie service. So we need to figure out what's the problem with this service. Now let's bring the contract, and you can see that a very large number of customers have signed the month-to-month contract, whereas only 190 number of customers have subscribed to our 1-year contract, and 145 customers subscribed for 2 years. And those who have subscribed for 2 years, their churn rate is 4.1%, but those who are using the month-to-month contract, their churn rate is 54%. A huge gap between the churn rate between 2-year and month-to-month contract. So if we can somehow provide our senior citizens 2-year contract in some discounts, we can surely retain our existing customers. Now let's bring the paperless billing, and you can see that those who are using paperless billing, their churn rate is much high, but those who are not using the paperless billing, their churn rate is much lower, which is 29.3%. And the total number of customers that are not using paperless billing is only 266, whereas those who are using paperless billing, the number is quite high. So paperless billing is not a good thing. We can provide the bill with proper documentation to our senior citizen, then I think we can reduce our churn rate for senior citizens. Now let's bring the payment method, and you can see that 594 senior citizens are using our electronic check, and the churn rate is 53%, whereas who are using the bank transfer automatic and credit card automatic, the churn rate is much lower. But those who are using the bank transfer automatic, their churn rate is minimum, which is 22%, and the total number of customers who are using it is 233. So if we can switch the payment method for our senior citizen from electronic check to bank transfer automatic, we can significantly reduce our churn rate for the senior citizen. And the reason the churn rate is quite high for the electronic check, I think that it is mainly manual, and most customers are using month-to-month contract, and they need to pay every month manually. So I think it is quite a hassle for the senior citizen to do this, and this can cause them to leave the service. So if you can provide them 2-year contract, and if it is bank transfer automatic, then they don't need to go through all of the processes to make the payment every month. And by doing that, and if we can bring the automation, we can reduce our churn rate. Now let's bring monthly charges range, and we need to adjust this a little bit. If you haven't seen this, how I have done this, I have discussed it in the previous video. Now let's bring this at the bottom. Yeah, now it is in order. You can see that most of our senior citizens are lies in between 67 to 100 USD, and the number is 675, and the churn rate is quite high because they are, I think, using the multiple lines, and they are using streaming TV or the streaming movie service that are quite useless in this point of time. So if we can look further, that those who are using in the range of 67 to 100 USD, what services they are using, then we can clearly do a data-driven decisions. Now let's bring the total charges range, and it is in order. And you can see those who are between 0 to 2.8 thousand total charges range, the number of total customers is 662. More than half customers have left using our service, because I think most of them are using month-to-month contract or electronic check as their payment method. That's why the churn rate is quite high. Those who are between 5.7 to 8.6 thousand, their churn rate is much lower. I think most of the users have subscribed to our 2-year contract, and I think they are not using the electronic check payment method, and they are not using the useless services also. That's why the churn rate for this range is minimum and is quite low. So the reason for the higher churn are month-to-month contract, paperless billing, and payment method. And how we can reduce the churn rate? If we can switch the senior citizen to 2-year contract, then we can reduce our churn rate for the senior citizen. We need to stop the paperless billing also, and we need to switch the payment method from electronic check to bank transfer automatic. And if we can provide the online security, online backup, and device protection service to our senior citizen, then we can significantly reduce our churn rate, because those are really very good services, as it was indicating by the churn rate metrics. If you have enjoyed this video so far, please give it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any question, you can ask in the comments below. See you soon in the next video.